Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to start off by giving you congratulations for being selected as the Deputy Speaker for this Parliament. We wish you all the best, and it's good grooming for the next session. I rise today to speak about the Conservative Opposition Day motion regarding food inflation and the lack of a Liberal budget. As a businessman, I've always seen budgets as opportunities to provide a clear path forward, one that even shows priorities and what matters most to a company or organization. A budget builds consensus or direction and keeps us all on the same path. In fact, I've heard it said that a budget is a blueprint for freedom, and I would concur. A budget is like a map. It helps us prepare for the future so that we can assess how much is coming in and how much is going out. But a budget is more than just numbers. It is about making wise choices. A good budget takes care of the needs and saves a little for the wants. Let's break that down a little bit here. Now, the Prime Minister, who went across the country claiming that he was the man with a plan, is not providing the blueprint for his plan. Here we are, about to spend $500 billion with no budget. Look at what happened in and right after the throne speech. We were told that our new government would cap operating spending at 2% annually. And then, not even 2 hours later, a bill was introduced that boosted overall spending by 8%. That's 8% more than the Trudeau government spent in the last year of office. And yet, we were told that this government would spend less. He is spending more, and not on investments, but oddly, more on consultants. I remember reading about a senior policy advisor with the Treasury Board saying that when hiring consultants, it was hard to tell when the contract was successful or not. And he added that he knew on numerous cases where consultants were hired to check the work of other consultants. In other words, we paid money to consultants to check the work of consultants. Like, what an incompetent government. Now, here we are. The consulting spending up to a record of $26.1 billion. That's more than 36% increase in 1 year. And to help us better understand how much that means for the average Canadian citizen, that is roughly $1,400 spent on consultants for every single household in Canada. As the National Post said, this Liberal government is spending more than the previous Justin Trudeau government did, with no plan on ever getting back to a balanced budget. We need a budget, and that's why Parliament voted for the Conservative amendment to the throne speech, calling for a budget this spring. That's also why Conservatives are giving the Prime Minister another opportunity to produce a budget. Canadians need to see a plan that outlines how he will pay for all this spending. You'll remember how we heard throughout the campaign Mr. Carney promising that he had a plan ready to go, that a plan...
I have a point of order from the Parliamentary Secretary to Government House Leader.
Yeah, just point of order. A member is not allowed to use names.
I'll remind the member for Provencher he can't refer to ministers or cabinet ministers or the Prime Minister by their first name or last name.
Okay, I got that. Okay. So, you'll remember that during the campaign, the current Prime Minister promised that he had a plan ready to go, that a plan beats no plan. So I ask, where is the plan? By the way, I also want to split my time. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I have read arguments in some media against providing that plan, and none of them are compelling or convincing. Interesting, in my reading, I discovered that the 3 longest times in between budgets were during World War II, during COVID, and in 2001. You know what I found out? All 3 of those periods were under Liberal governments.
No way.
As I explained at the beginning of my speech, a budget is a plan, it's a direction, it's a path forward that reveals and expresses what's important. As we heard from the National Post assessment, right now it appears that there is no intention on ever balancing the budget, so let's ask that question. Why does rising government debt matter? According to Jay Goldbert of the Winnipeg Sun, multiple studies have shown that an increasing debt-to-GDP ratio puts upward pressure on long-term interest rates, raising borrowing costs for individuals, families, and governments, all leading to an increased tax burden for families and the middle class, and creating barriers to economic growth. The truth is, But the Liberal deficit spending also leads to higher prices at the grocery store. In a recent Parliamentary Budget Office report, the cost of servicing public debt, while currently sitting at $49.1 billion for 2025-26, will rise to just under $70 billion in 2029-30 fiscal year. That means that just to carry increased debt, we would be paying $70 billion in interest on our debt alone. Just imagine what we could be doing with $70 billion. But it's going to go to pay for interest on today's spending. You may recall the Prime Minister said that we would judge him by the price Canadians pay at the grocery store. And that being the case, let's look at some of those price increases for just this year to date. Beef up 34%, oranges up 26%, apples up 18%, white rice up 14%, sweet potatoes 12%, beef rib cuts almost 12%, coffee 9%, infant formula 9%, meatless burgers, don't know who would eat that, but it's up 6%, chicken breasts 6%, pork rib cuts 6%, pork shoulders 5%, and eggs 3.6%. I find it very interesting that our supply management food processors have had the least increase. Concerning is the most significant increases are in the meat category, the protein that we also desperately need, 4 to 34% increases right across the board. Canadians are going to pay almost $17,000 on food this year alone, an increase of $800 from last year, all while 2 million Canadians visit the food bank each and every month. How can Canadians afford this? Statistics Canada, in their latest report, looked at the annual income in Canada. The latest information shows that the median household income in our country in 2025 will be $68,400. If we take 30% off that in taxes, that leaves us with $47,000. In other words, over 1/3 of a family's after-tax income will go to food alone. And we heard in the House today that the cost of living in Ontario averages 52% of household income. So that leaves a whopping 13% of a family's income for everything else. Wow, transportation, clothing, entertainment, miscellaneous, 13%. Canadians need more than elbows up, Mr. Speaker. Get your elbows down and get to work. The Prime Minister said that he would collect $20 billion from the United States through tariffs, yet tariffs are in effect at zero for products coming from the United States. Only weeks ago, we were assured that there would be no more tariffs applied to Canada, but yet here we are. Now we're facing a doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminum. With Canada being the world's 4th largest aluminum producer and top aluminum exporter, this is concerning. In Canada, we produce approximately 3.3 million tons of aluminum every year, and all the projections say production will increase. Demand is expected to increase by as much as 40% in the next 5 years. Aluminum mining supports 9,500 direct jobs and 20,000 indirect jobs. When we translate those numbers into the impact on working Canadians, in Canada we're talking about 30,000 plus jobs that are going to be affected by these tariffs. So a 50% tariff is very alarming when the United States was Canada's largest export destination for aluminum products, accounting for 92% of total aluminum exports. From what we see, plans continue all around us. For example, I wonder which countries Canada may be talking to with regarding the purchase of our raw materials. How are those conversations going? When the President of the United States returned from a recent trip to the Middle East, he announced hundreds of billions of dollars in trade on his return. According to the presidential announcements, the EGA plans to build a $4 billion plant in Oklahoma next year. That smelter will have a capacity to produce as much as 600,000 tons a year of primarily aluminum. This will almost double the production of aluminum in the United States. Mr. Speaker, we can't be led by these promises without seeing the plan forward. I can remember very recently when we kept hearing from our friends on the other side reciting that we needed to take their word for it, as they repeatedly claimed that the carbon tax wasn't causing inflation. And meanwhile, the Parliamentary Budget Officer explained that the total cumulative effect of the carbon tax, even after the rebates, meant that most families were paying more. And all the while, we kept saying, when you tax the farmer who grows the food, the trucker who transports it, the store that sells it, and the family who buys it, prices inevitably go up. Then, as soon as this Liberal government finally heeded the Conservative plea to remove the carbon tax, Statistics Canada announced that the decrease in inflation was directly related to the removal of the carbon tax. The very next month, inflation went down from 2.3% to 1.7% in 1 month. To wrap it up, Mr. Speaker, the Liberals need to take a lesson from our common sense advice, and I invite them to consider the wisdom of our opposition motion. Canadians are depending on a plan that shows them the way forward.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. Le député pour...
Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, since I've been here at the beginning of this 45th Parliament, I've noted that the Conservatives are criticizing, and I have a question for the Conservatives, criticizing inflation. Well, do the Conservatives, can they finally propose concrete measures to reduce the cost of living instead of just criticizing? You have to make proposals instead of just criticizing. Thank you.
Member for Provencher.
I want to thank that member for that question. It must be probably one of the first questions he's asked in the House here, so welcome to the House. You talk about criticizing. Our role as opposition members is to hold this government to account and to criticize the things that we see are bad for Canada and bad for Canadians. We have offered concrete solutions, Mr. Speaker. What we are offering today is a concrete solution of presenting a budget so that this House can analyze and scrutinize the government plans to tell them where we think they need to change course, improve their plans, or perhaps, as we did with the Ways and Means motion, to give them the nod of approval and say, keep going. I doubt it, but maybe.
Questions et commentaires.
Questions and
Le député pour Mirabel.
The Honourable Member for Mirabel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. On the government benches, we've heard that negotiations are moving forward, and there may be a direct negotiation between the Prime Minister and President Trump. Yet, there's no transparency in these trade negotiations in Canada. These agreements are negotiated behind closed doors, and the government can't even talk about the content, but only on the implementation of these deals. And even though in the negotiation plans and agreements that are negotiated, there are elements that affect exclusive provincial jurisdiction. They haven't even invited a delegation from Quebec. So I'm wondering if the colleague has something to say about this, if he has an opinion in terms of the Bloc's request for the Quebec government to be able to appoint negotiators to be at the negotiating table, because the government is negotiating with absolute lack of transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for that question. We used to hear in this House that sunshine was the best medicine. We don't hear that anymore, do we? No. What we're hearing now is, I have a plan. I have a plan, trust me. Well, there is no plan. The plan should be the budget. If we had a budget, we would know what we're doing. When it comes to trade negotiations with the United States, we're again kept in the dark. Instead of collaborating, and this Team Canada approach, which is what we heard so much of during the campaign, Team Canada, Team Canada. There's no Team Canada. There's elbows up, and they'll get your elbows down and get back to work.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The member for Barrie South Innisfil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the honourable member for his speech. Looking forward to hearing the coach in a couple of minutes here. But, Mr. Speaker, it's been 18 months since we've had a budget. Just a couple of weeks ago, Parliament voted in a majority for the government to present a budget. We've seen over the last 10 years a decline in our democracy that happened long before Donald Trump became the President of the United States. Would the honourable member not agree with me that this constitutes a contempt of this Parliament, contempt in a way that we've seen a pattern of this government?
The honourable member for Provencher.
Thank you to my colleague for that excellent question. He's absolutely right. This House was very clear last week. We were unanimous as opposition parties that this government needed to present a budget. And the behavior and the actions of this current government, this current Prime Minister, are absolutely a discredit to the House of Commons and are operating in a way that is contrary to the will of Parliament. Parliament sent a clear message, gave the Prime Minister and the Liberal government an opportunity to work collaboratively with all the rest of the opposition party members in this House. They chose not to. They chose to go their own path. Poor communication, poor display of cohesiveness in this House. And you know what? The Americans see that the way things are going, and I don't think that's going to bode well for the Prime Minister and his negotiations. But what he needs to demonstrate is that he, at the very least, respects the will of Parliament, respects the wishes of opposition parties when they form a majority decision.